What is the rural life of Blue Star related to Earth? In his hometown in China, he was just a little transparent, but when he came to the countryside of the Mao family, he became a coveted commodity in the village. He had a lot of strength and was hardworking, had a wife and children, and even had a good feeling for his father-in-law and mother-in-law. Planting potatoes and vegetables during busy farming hours, fishing and hunting during idle farming hours, and even drifting in tanks and armored vehicles on the snowy plains of Siberia when bored. Isn't this more comfortable than living in my hometown with the Fukuoka 996? There are no fancy words throughout, even a little cheats, but it's not a big deal. Chapter 1. Visitors from Remote Villages. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uncle Anton, thank you for taking care of me this year. Suli handed the cigarettes and vodka he had just bought to a middle-aged chubby man squatting beside him smoking. Old Anton took the tobacco and alcohol, looked at the Chinese youth scratching his head and laughing at him, and stood up in silence for a while to pat his shoulder. Misha, don't blame Uncle Anton, he said. Why should I blame you? If it weren't for your and Aunt Liaofana's care, I would have frozen to death on the street long ago. Suli gave old Anton a big hug with a grin and said, I brought it on myself when the customer reported it. I didn't listen to you and went to the front hall. Fortunately, the boss has already paid me my salary. When I make a lot of money in the future, I will also open a grand liquor store for Uncle Anton and Aunt Liaofana. You are a good child, Uncle wishes you all the best in the future. Anton's eyes turned red and he said, let's go. If it's too late, we won't be able to catch the first bus to the train station. Goodbye Uncle Anton. Suli waved his hand while carrying his suitcase and walked out of the small door of the hotel kitchen. He quickly walked towards the dim alley, and after less than 20 meters, an old SUV parked in the dark suddenly opened its door. 3 big and round-bodied men rushed out of the car. The leading man punched Suli in the back of the head, and the other 2 men immediately caught Suli's limp body and stuffed him and his suitcase into the SUV. The leading man then lit a cigarette and slowly arrived at the kitchen door. Old Anton looked at the burly man with a beard on his face and sighed, Ivan, treat Makarov better, he's a great guy who knows how to be grateful. Don't worry, old Anton. This kid will become my brother-in-law in the future. Can I treat him badly? Ivan took out a thick stack of red banknotes from his wallet pocket and said, take it, this is what we agreed on before. Anton shook his head and said, no need, it's all from the same village. Let's keep it for them to build houses. After finishing speaking, he waved his hand and closed the small door, put his tobacco and alcohol in his locker, sat in a chair and silently lit a cigarette. Suli, this child, was indeed pitiful. The old man applied for his study visa and kicked him to Irkutsk. He, who is unfamiliar with his place and doesn't know Russian, is often bullied. Later, just as he withdrew his living expenses from the bank, he was snatched and beaten up, huddled on the roadside like a poor little dog. I happened to meet my wife on our way home and took care of them all night. This child is not very honest and doesn't want to go to school well. He insists on learning cooking with me after class. Recalling the little moments with him by my side, I couldn't help but shake my head and smile, saying, I don't know if this is good luck or bad luck. It won't go bad at all. Ivan is the child he watched grow up with, 7 brothers in the family, and 2 twin sisters who burned their brains with fever when they were young. Will the child eventually get married when they grow up? But for the 2 little girls with bad minds, it's not easy to find a man, let alone in a remote countryside. He knows very well about the virtues of Slavic men, and they naturally know it too. 2 months ago, my son-in-law had some trouble. When I was accompanying my daughter to the police station, I happened to meet Ivan. I didn't expect this kid to become the police captain. It was at that time that the 2 of them talked about this matter. Ivan helped him handle his son-in-law's affairs, but he wanted to help him find an honest and inexperienced young man. Anton's first choice in his mind was Suli, and that's when the scene just happened. Ivan shrugged his shoulders and returned to the car. A man in the back seat patted Su Li's lower abdomen and said, "Big brother, old Anton is really right. This kid is thin-skinned and tender, but he looks like a pony. Put away his documents and wallet, the registration office is about to open. I've invested a lot of money for my sister." Ivan stepped on the accelerator and drove the car out of the alley. When the car stopped at the foreign marriage registration office in Irkutsk, the sky began to darken. After waiting for about 10 minutes, a man waved to them and opened the door. Ivan got out of the car with the documents he had prepared earlier and followed the other party inside. In less than half an hour, Ivan got into the car with a smile and handed the file bag to the man in the back seat, saying, "Let's go home." The car was driving north all the way, and when Su Lime woke up in a daze, he saw two Slavic men sitting next to him, one of whom was shaking a pistol in front of him. "Be obedient, I still have over 30,000 rubles on me. If you want, take them all away." Su Li muttered misfortune to himself, and the man beside him squinted his eyes and said, "You little kitchen assistant really have money. A large part of it is living expenses provided by the family." His words made the three people in the car frown to themselves. Didn't old Anton say this kid was alone? Now he's popping up at home to give him money again. Isn't this a scam on their family? But I haven't been in touch with my family for a long time. Su Li raised his hand and rubbed the back of his head. "If you want to tie me up and ask my family for money, you can dispel this idea. My father wishes I would never appear in front of him." "Why?" Ivan frowned while driving and said, "No parents hate their children. Did you make a big mistake?" "He was so angry with my mother that he rebuilt a family with his mistress. My younger brother often laughed at me, and I couldn't help but beat him up. As a result, he kicked me here to school." Su Li's eyes turned slightly red as he spoke, and he picked up his hands from his body. The man on the right had a lot of cigarettes and a lighter in his hand, shaking and saying, "Smoking so little is not friendly to your body." Su Li ignored him and took a cigarette to light, slowly smoking. After he finished smoking, the strong man next to him took out a black cloth bag and put a set on his head. The barking of dogs woke up Su Li, who was confused. Ivan took the black cloth bag from his head and patted his pale face, saying, "We're home, home." Su Li rubbed his eyes and got off the car. The scene he saw was no different from that of rural China. A few big dogs with iron chains were staring at him, and his fierce gaze made him feel uncomfortable all over. He, who had been sitting in the car for over 20 hours, urgently needed to take a taxi. Ivan took him to an independent small wooden shed and said, "There's paper inside." Good. He thought of several ways to escape in the pit, but ultimately lost to his weak body. Long rides and lack of food made him extremely hungry now, and he had no strength to run away. When he came out again, he found that there were many people in the yard, but they were all older. They were curious and staring at him up and down. Ivan was talking to a few old men, and when he saw Su Li coming out, he waved to him. "This is my father Andre, and he will also be your father in the future." "Ah." Su Li looked at the old man in front of him who was more than enough to be his grandfather, and then looked at Ivan with a serious expression on his face. "Aren't you guys tying me up to get my waist?" Chapter 2. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are you saying? Ivan glared at him angrily, then took out the folder and opened the marriage certificate inside. "From now on, you will be my brother. In law. We are all a family here, and no one will bully you. You just need to take care of my sister, my parents, and me." "No, I'm from China." Su Li looked at the open marriage certificate and his eyes almost popped out. The girl in the photo was very beautiful, not like a real person, with a bright and innocent smile, like a ray of warm sunshine. But why did his photo become less and less like the same thing? "When did I get the certificate from your sister?" "Just yesterday morning. If I shout, 'Can't wake you up,' I'll assume it's your default." Before Su Li's right hand touched the marriage certificate, Ivan put the notebook back in the file bag and handed it to the Slavic chubby mother next to the old man, saying, "Mom, his name is." "Hey, do you have the name of our place?" "I forgot." Su Li pouted and turned his head aside. Then a strong man raised his hand and slapped him on the back of the head, causing him to stumble with tremendous force. "My brother is asking you something," he said. Makarov. Su Li rubbed his head and muttered, but it made Ivan laugh. "Did you come up with this name yourself? What's wrong with calling it macaroni?" "Ha ha ha, Yuri, why did you hit so hard?" The chubby old lady, who had been silent for a long time, pulled Su Li, who rubbed his head and looked at him carefully, holding his face. "Child, from now on, you can stay here and live a good life. Your wedding room has already been cleaned up by your father and me," she said. "This grandmother, you should call me Natasha, Mom." Pang Dama smiled kindly. Su Li had thick eyebrows, big eyes, fair skin, and a slightly chubby face. Obviously, he had a good life before, estimated to be less than 1.8 meters tall. He was thin and picky, and his slender figure made Pang Dama worry a bit. "Makarov, how old are you this year?" "It's almost 16. "That's okay, you can still grow taller in the future. Mom will definitely raise you strong, just like your brothers." Natasha smiled and pinched Su Li's small face, then grabbed his hand and recognized him in the yard. "This is your Uncle Julian, this is your Uncle Pushkin, this is..." This kid's eyes are wandering around, probably not staying here peacefully. Old Andrei stared at Su Li's back, while Ivan beside him laughed and said, "We are closest to Bratsk. It takes more than 6 hours to drive, and he doesn't know any of the nearby villages. Where should he go? This kid is a bit timid. You and a few uncles scared him, probably for a little over half a year, and he has already worn away his caution." Ivan lit cigarettes for the nearby uncles and said, "If it weren't for Anna and Eva's lack of intelligence, it would be this skinny kid's turn. When he sees my 2 angelic sisters, maybe he doesn't want to leave yet." While they were chatting, Natasha and Su Li entered the house. The space was not small, but the furniture was a bit outdated. The living room was very tidy, and a large table was filled with candy cookies. "Are you hungry? Mom has prepared freshly baked liba for you." Natasha asked Su Li to sit at the table, while she entered the kitchen and cut a few slices of bread and smoked sausages. She then served a bowl of red vegetable soup in front of Su Li and said, "Eat it, child. If it's not enough, Mom will serve it for you." Thank you." Although the chubby old lady claimed that her mother made him feel strange, her polite attitude still reassured him a lot. At least he didn't have to be beaten anymore. He ate bread and smoked sausages in big gulps, while Natasha sat on the side watching happily. "Mom, I'm hungry." "I'm also hungry." 2 small heads appeared next to the door frame, and Natasha waved to them. 2 young girls wearing loose T-shirts and shorts. Happily pounced on Natasha and tightly hugged her shorter stature. Natasha pressed the twins onto the chair and said, "Mom, give you kaliba. I want to eat smoked sausages, I want it too." The twins looked at a stack of smoked sausages on Su Li's plate, their beautiful emerald green eyes sparkling. Su Li held the 2 pieces of liba from the plate in his hand and then pushed it in front of the 2 of them. "Eat it, The girl on the left tied a single ponytail, while the girl on the right tied a double ponytail. The 2 twisted smoked sausages and stuffed them into their small mouths, eating while happily shaking their bodies. The headlights on their chest almost blinded Su Li's dog eyes. The sisters have a rare white golden hair, small faces, green eyes, straight noses, small mouth and thin lips. Chewing smoked intestines makes their cheeks bulge like greedy hamsters. They have a Slavic-style large skeleton, slightly wide shoulders, and the headlights increase as they sway, making Su Li dare not look anymore. His waist is blocked by a loose T-shirt, and he cannot see it clearly, but there is one thing he just noticed. Height. These 2 girls are taller than him, which makes him feel stressed. He eats Liba's eyes and sweeps sister's faces, and doesn't know which one he will marry. When Natasha came in carrying a plate, Suli was drinking soup with her head down. She saw her two precious daughters happily eating smoked sausages, and a smile appeared on her face. It seemed that this little guy had a good attitude, knowing that good things should be eaten by his own daughter first. After putting down the plate, she touched Suli's head and said, "Tonight, all your sister-in-law will come back. Let's have a good celebration together, even if we help you with your wedding." Suli immediately thought carefully and said, I'm rich, why don't we book a restaurant?" Seeing Natasha shaking her head with a smile, he muttered, "I'm not yet 16 this year, I'm still a child." He at your age, I'm married to your father." Natasha sat next to Suli and said, "Ivan just told me roughly that it's not easy for you to live alone in Irkutsk. Old Anton walked out of our village and the children he sees are not bad. Mom, let me tell you the truth. If you live with my girls sincerely, Mom will take care of your daily life. You only need to help with a few days of work during the busy farming season. At other times, you can go fishing or go hunting in the forest. When you have children, Mom can still help you take care of them. When the children get older, Anna and Eva will take them with you to live in the city. You don't have to worry about work, Ivan will help you get a good job. Suli looked at Natasha with a smile on her face, and then at the twins across the street happily eating Lepa's smoked sausages. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Which one do I want to marry?" "Of course both girls followed you, didn't Ivan tell you?" "Two." Suli let out a howl, startling the twins across from him. They were holding labars and didn't know why Suli was so loud. The Ivan brothers, who had been in the yard all along, immediately rushed into the room and said, "What's going on?" Chapter 3. The Seven Brothers of Huluwa. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kid, this is a great deal that's cheap for you. Are you still unwilling? The second son Yuri stared at Suli with a pair of big eyeballs and wanted to say something more. When Natasha patted his arm, he immediately stood aside and looked at Suli angrily. His sister was as cute as an angel, and this kid even pretended to be there. When Anna and Eve were 7 years old, they went to play in the forest. Andre and I were growing potatoes, and these two girls didn't know what they had eaten. When Andre and my dog found them, they were lying on the ground in a coma, with dirty mouths and fruit juice. When they got home in the evening, they started to have a fever. Natasha sighed and said, "Our place is too far away. The nearest health station takes over an hour to drive." When we arrived at the place, the doctor couldn't see any problems, so they hung 2 bottles of fever-reducing medicine. The fever subsided shortly after returning, and we didn't take it seriously. We slowly discovered their mind's side, to be honest. Suli spoke up at this moment, and coincidentally, old Andre also returned to his room. The whole family was staring at Suli, which made him feel a bit overwhelmed. Actually, after leaving Uncle Anton yesterday morning, I didn't know what I should do next. I said I was going to study in Moscow, but it was just comforting him. Uncle Anton is very considerate of me and has always been afraid that I will learn poorly. He looked down at the plate in front of him and said, "Ever since my dad stopped me, I haven't had the intention of continuing my studies. I was bullied by my classmates at school, and when I returned to the apartment, I was left alone in a daze. A few days ago, after being reported by a customer, I decided to go somewhere else to relax. Actually, I don't know how to go on my future path either." Suli looked up at the twins across from him, then met Natasha beside him and said, "Your daughters are very beautiful. I, a poor boy with nothing, really don't deserve them. I don't know anything about them. If they follow me and have you to take care of them, I think I will have a very comfortable life. But what if you and your uncle are gone? How should I take care of them, someone who knows nothing? Did you follow me for the previous meal and want the next one? Old Mao has many outstanding young people who are more suitable for taking care of them than me. I'll continue to wander. Click, the sudden sound of bullets loading shattered the silence in the room. Old Andre had an extra local specialty in his hand, and the dark muzzle of his gun was pressed against the back of Su Li's head. He sneered, "You cunning little Chinese ghost." The words before were really touching, but the last sentence is what you really want to say, right? Oh no, I was caught. What I said wasn't sincere enough. Or should I shed some tears? It shouldn't be. Su Li slowly turned his head and saw Lao Maozi smoking a cigarette, holding an AK local specialty and sneering at him. When I was young, I traveled far and wide. Who hasn't seen me before? You little ghost trying to deceive me. Humph, hee grandpa, do we have something to say? Well. Su Li pressed down the muzzle of his gun, and the cold texture was indeed a real thing, which made him sweat a layer of white hair on his back. What I said is true, he said. I've been fooling around with Uncle Anton in the kitchen for over a year now, and I can't even eat the dishes I make myself, let alone make them for others to eat. Besides, look at my small physique, and then look at your two daughters. They are so much stronger than me, and one thigh is more than half thicker than me. I'm still a child. Another thing he didn't dare to say was that when the sun just shone on the sisters, there was a layer of fine hair on their faces and necks, which was much more than his hair. How could they talk this evening? Humph, coincidentally, our daughter is the same age as you. Are you both children? Just get along with each other more. Old Andre could tell that the stinky kid in front of him clearly disliked his daughter's chubby appearance, and you didn't pee and take care of her yourself. Is that your small body? You are small and just right. If you dare to bully my daughter in the future, even though I am old, it will still be easy to beat you, little sparrow. As long as I am here for a day, you can't bully our two daughters. Even if I die, I still have 7 sons. You little boy, just give us your precious daughter and be a lifelong nanny. Put your ID card and bank card with my mom first. As for your phone, Ivan weighed his green screen phone and said, the signal here is not very good, and it's useless if you want it. I'll leave it all to my mom for safekeeping. When she thinks you've adapted to the life here, she'll give it back to you. But what about my visa here? Then you don't have to worry. I'm a police officer and I have plenty of ways to handle it for you. Ivan took out his police ID card and shook it in front of Su Li, sneering, by the way, I'll introduce a few of my younger brothers to you. As he spoke, he pulled over 2 strong men on the side and said, Yuri, the second son, works at the Railway Bureau in Bratsk. This is Vasily, the third son. He opened a small supermarket in Bratsk and brought back a batch of snacks and daily necessities every month. The fourth one works at a hospital in Moscow, the fifth one works at MDM Bank in St. Petersburg, and the sixth one is a jerk. He went to live in Novosibirsk with his girlfriend and his family. The 3 of them don't usually come back, so I won't introduce them to you. The 7th one is Boyka, and he was just transferred by the signal flag in March this year. After introducing his younger brothers, he smiled and patted Su Li's shoulder, saying, Kid, even if you don't work for the rest of your life, our brothers can support you, so you don't need to have any psychological burden. Just take care of my parents and 2 younger sisters. Before binding Su Li, he checked the information of this boy and found that he had been in Irkutsk for more than 2 years without any bad records. His account received 5,000 Chinese yuan in monthly living expenses, and his basic monthly salary as a police captain who eats public meals was only this amount. Su Li heard Ivan say that he had 6 younger brothers, and couldn't help but mutter to himself, your grandmother has a leg. How about the 7 brothers of Huluwa? Aren't my 2 younger sisters beautiful? Old San Vasily saw Su Li's listless appearance and was about to tidy up Su Li when a barking dog sounded outside. Yuri came to the window and glanced outside, saying, it's Yulia and the others. Old Andre nodded and hid the local specialties, saying, everyone hurry up and set it up. I'll take Makarov to take a shower. He patted Su Li's shoulder and said, let's go, young man. Let's go take a shower and rest. Don't take what Ivan and his team said to heart either. Su Li agreed verbally, but cursed in his heart. I'll go with you, right? You old furry local specialty is on my head, so why don't you tell me not to take it to heart? You wait when I escape, I must find a journalist to expose you. Is it remarkable for your son to become a police officer and a doctor? Let them all go to jail to eat. He swore and followed Old Mao to the backyard to take a shower. Chapter 4. Simple Folk Customs. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The weather in Siberia in July is suitable. In a small farmyard, there is a long table full of rich food. Su Li is wearing the new clothes prepared by Natasha, sitting between two sisters in the same dress. Opposite is a row of old men and women in the village, smiling and greeting them. Old Andrei raised his glass and said, "Today, my precious girls Anna and Eva are going to marry Makarov from China. To be honest, I don't feel well in my heart, but when the children grow up, they must have their own family. As their fathers, I wish my children happiness and longevity." Ula, family and friends on both sides of the dining table raised their glasses and cheered together, then drank a full glass of vodka in one gulp. Su Limi took a sip and put down his glass, while the two girls beside him happily ate smoked fish. The glass was already empty. "Anna, did you drink all the wine?" Su Li whispered a question in Anna's ear, and Anna ate the smoked fish and said, "It's a bit spicy." For this evaluation, he didn't know what to say. Everyone was happily drinking, eating, and singing. Unconsciously, everyone was drinking a bit high. Mr. Pushkin, who was opposite Su Li, bounced his cigarette butt away and had an extra local product called paposha in his hand. He grinned at Su Li, who was stunned, revealing 2 rows of smoked teeth. "Little guy, be good to Anna and Eva. They are not only angels of Andrei, but also angels of other families in our village." As he spoke, he stood up and said, "I heard that in China, we don't have any firecrackers for getting married. I have paposha, the old man. I'll give you congratulations after a round of fighting." Doodle 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 doodle, the chicken that Su Li was biting on his mouth fell into the plate with a snap. Looking at the sparks from Paposha's gun and the smiling faces of the other old dang, he couldn't help but shiver. "I brought a few small cantaloupes." Yuri happily opened his small vest, with several black painted F.1 fragmentation grenades hanging inside. "This antique from decades ago, I didn't expect this old fur to still be preserved so much. Let's also listen to the noise." Lao Mauzi happily took out one and was about to remove the pin when Su Li quickly stood up and waved his hand, Grandpa, as long as you have the intention. Do you look down on me?" Old Mao's eyes widened and he said, "If that old man Pushkin can shoot, then I can't throw a grenade. Everyone is here to congratulate you, why can't I throw a grenade?" Different, Su Li was about to cry, while the others just looked at him happily. Anna and Eva, their faces turning red, applauded hard and said, all right, let go of thunder, hee look, our angels are so happy." As Julian spoke, he unplugged the bolt and slowly arrived at the entrance of the yard. After scanning outside to make sure no one was there, he threw the grenade into the pre-dug pit and said, "Come on." After waiting for several seconds, he said, "Why is there no sound? It shouldn't be." Lao Mauzi hiccuped and was about to go check the situation when the ground beneath his feet shook slightly and said, "Bang, what do I usually treasure like? How could it not make a sound?" Julian grumbled and happily returned to the table, picking his chin at Su Li, who was stunned. "Little devil, if you dare to bully our little angel, I'll pull out the plug of the cantaloupe and stuff it into your mouth," he said. Su Li quickly pecked at the rice with the little chicken. Before he could continue to express himself, Popov, who had been holding a cigarette and remained silent, suddenly stood up and stepped on the stool, taking out a RPG from under the table. "Grandpa," Su Li was really scared and cried, tears streaming down her face as she said, "Don't scare me, okay? Woo, I want to go home. Wow, Popov carried RPG and scratched his big nose, turning his head to look at old Andrei and saying, "What's going on?" Seeing Andrei wave his hand, he shrugged and stuffed the RPG under the table again. As if nothing had happened, he looked up and slurped a full glass of vodka into his stomach, saying, "Hiccup, you're so cowardly, much worse than us back then." Natasha punched her husband in anger and said, "Look at what you've done. How big he is. What should he do if he's scared? It's okay for a boy to be scared, maybe the more scared he is, the bolder he becomes." Andrei muttered indifferently, and Ivan's wife Yulia stood up and came to Anna's side, whispering a few words in her ear. Anna looked at the table full of delicious food, then at Suli crying beside her. With a deflated mouth, she took him back to her own room. Eva was eating chicken legs when she saw Anna and Suli returning to the house. She thought they had gone to play games, so she bit on the chicken legs and followed along. Yulia patted Eva's plump butt and said, "Do you know how to coax him? You three will be good friends from now on." Eva, who was just over 1.8 meters tall, bounced back into the room and saw her new friend still crying. After some thought, she handed the half-eaten chicken leg to Suli and said, "Don't cry, okay? I'll treat you to chicken legs, they're so delicious." Suli wiped away her tears and looked at the innocent twins on her face. She pushed Eva's little hand holding the chicken leg back and said, "You eat." "Okay then." Eva happily ate chicken legs, while Anna reached out and poked Suli's face. Her greasy fingers tapped Suli's face and said, "You're a boy, why are you so timid? We often play with Popov's toy, and he scares you." Suli didn't sound right when he heard it. "Do you call that a toy?" "Yes." Anna looked innocent and said, "Uncle Popov often takes us to play with his Natasha. We even use that fried fish. The water splashes are so big that we can't even hold the fish in a bucket. Uncle Julian and my family also have tanks." Eva threw the chicken leg bones into the trash can and was about to wipe her dirty hands on her body when Suli grabbed her and picked up a wet towel from the table to wipe her hands. "Dirty hands cannot wipe clothes, otherwise new clothes will also become dirty and unsightly," she said. "Oh." Eva looked at Suli, who was wiping her hands, and her face turned red. "You're really good looking, unlike my dad and brother, who all have beards on their faces and are so furry that they look really ugly." Suli smiles and wipes Anna's greasy hands. The sisters' hands are thin, white and tender. It seems that they don't do any work at ordinary times. He gets up, puts the towel away and scans the room. A large bed is placed in the corner of the room. Across from the bed is a row of wardrobes, with a small aisle left in the middle. A window is opened on the wall at the end of the bed, and there is a TV cabinet on the right side of the room door next to the wall. On top of it is a 90% new big but color TV. There is a curtain next to the TV cabinet, and inside is the bathroom. In the middle of the room, there is a table in the south, filled with snacks and some photos. He slowly came to the window by looking at the room, stretched out his head to look out, and it happened to be in contact with a few pairs of green eyes. Chapter 5. This wave seems to make Mama. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Why does the neck feel chilly after Chapter 6? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. This is just a flower. All the big dogs in my house are its children. It's really amazing. When I was a child, it was it that brought my parents to find me and Eva. Anna crouched down in the yard, holding the brownish-black Caucasus with her mouth already turned white. Eva put down the 2 buckets in her hand and scooped a large spoonful of cornmeal batter, followed by a pair of pig droppings that had just been taken out of the freezer. It looked like pig lungs. Eva held the pig lung and handed it to Hua's mouth. The latter bit it tightly, afraid that her sharp teeth would scratch Eva's fingers. Eva and Anna happily kissed it on the face. Su Li felt it necessary to establish a good relationship with the hidden boss of this family, so he asked, "Can I touch it?" "Sure." Hua Hua is very obedient. Eva grabbed Su Li's right hand and slowly touched Hua Hua's neck. The furry touch was very smooth. Hua Hua spat out the pig lung in her mouth into her basin, looked up at Su Li, and enjoyed the other person's touch, making a comfortable wheezing sound in her throat. Soon Su Li picked up the bucket and followed the sisters to the other corner of the yard. When the Caucasus, who was chained, saw the master coming, the happy man stood up, a head taller than Su Li, and his front paws were about the size of a small sea bowl. Hey, it's time to eat, tsk tsk tsk. Su Li scooped up a large spoonful of corn flour paste for it, and seeing that it was several times larger than Hua Hua, he simply scooped up half a spoonful. Then, holding a pair of pig lungs, he trembled and handed it to the Caucasus. He didn't answer but stared at Su Liming. Suddenly, Eva hugged Su Liming's neck and kissed him on the face, saying, "From now on, he will be his family. He, you can't bully him." Wu He let out a few whimpers in his throat, then bit into the pig's lung. The warm breath sprayed onto Su Li's hand, causing a layer of white sweat on the back of his hand. Anna saw He take the pig's lung and said happily, "He is willing to eat the food you handed over. It seems that he also likes you very much. Is that so?" Su Li grinned. After the contact between Hua Hua and He, the remaining Xiao He and Xiao Xiao Huang became much easier. Looking at the two empty buckets in his hand and the quickly eliminated corn flour in Xiao Huang's food bowl, he turned his head and wiped his sweat with his arm. "Is this enough for them to eat?" "Not enough. I have to feed them again in the afternoon, and then give them a pig's paw or tail and ear before going to bed at night." Anna crouched down, watching Xiao Huang devour the cornmeal batter with great pleasure. She reached out and nodded happily on its nose, but Xiao Huang ignored her and continued to eat the batter. Soon, its large tongue licked and smashed the stainless steel food bowl to the ground. Eva pulled Su Li aside and said as if offering a treasure, "Actually, Anna and I can understand their words." "Is it really fake?" Su Li's eyes almost widened, and Eva nodded confidently, "Really, but my parents and brother don't believe what Anna and I said." Su Li's eyes turned and he brought Eva to He. At this moment, He was lying on the ground sunbathing, and his big tongue kept sticking out. "He, am I handsome?" "Woo woo woo woo." He stared at him and whimpered twice, then turned his head to ignore him. Eva giggled and said, "He said you're a little dog. I suspect you're cursing me." Su Li went to the pool to wash his hands, then tickled Eva's itching. She giggled happily and didn't notice that Eva's head collided with Su Li. The two of them let out a sigh at the same time. Su Li quickly helped Eva rub her forehead and said, "Is everything okay?" Eva pouted and leaned her head closer to Su Li, asking him to help her massage. However, Su Li suddenly felt a chill in her neck and raised her hand to scratch and look around. Without noticing anything, she cleaned the bucket and hung it upside down by the pool to dry the water. Then he held Eva's hand and went to find Anna. In a large wooden warehouse diagonally opposite them, old Andre snorted coldly, pinched the local specialty in his hand into his armpit, pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Young and inexperienced. Behind him were two huge objects, tightly covered by camouflage cloth. To the west of the warehouse, there was a row of wooden shelves filled with various tools, and below the wooden shelves were dozens of military green wooden boxes. Andre leaned the local specialty against the shelf, took out a black cloth, wiped the tools on the shelf one by one, and hummed, "The Alliance is unbreakable," while wiping. Su Li takes the sisters back to the house, sits on the sofa and doesn't know what to do. He scratches his head. "Where's Aunt Natasha? She was in the house just now, wasn't she?" Anna lay on the sofa, propping her feet up on Su Li's lap and said, "Mom's going to feed the pigs and cows. She probably won't be back until the afternoon. If you're hungry, I'll ask Dad to cook something delicious for you." My dad's barbecue is so delicious. Dad's barbecue is delicious. Eva nodded in agreement on the side, and Suli grabbed Anna's foot and looked at it. Her nails were a bit long, so she got up and entered the room. Soon, in the drawer under the bedside table, she dug out her nail clippers and took out a spoon. First, he dug out her ears, then slowly trimmed her nails. When Andre locked the wooden warehouse door and returned to the room, Suli was trimming Eva's nails. Andre glanced at her and went to the kitchen. The lunch table was a bit dull, with 4 people eating their own lunches. Suli wanted to talk to Andre, but the other person only focused on eating, at most giving them 3 cuts of smoked sausages and smoked fish. Uncle. Andre ignored him and cut the smoked fish for Eva. He ate pickled cucumbers and liba on his own. Suli scratched his nose and after some thought, he felt a bit embarrassed and called out, "Dad. What's going on?" The old man put down labar and pickled cucumber, wiped his mouth and looked at Suli. This really messed him up. Just wait for me to change my mind, okay? Auntie, won't she come back for lunch? She brought labar and red soup, you eat yours. Oh, Andre gave him a meaningful glance before continuing his meal. In the afternoon, I'll go to the ranch to slaughter a cow. You should eat more meat. With such a thin body, you'll be gone when the wind blows. Suli looked at his numb arms, then at his father-in-law's arms, which were not much thinner than his thighs. Suddenly, he realized that what he said made sense. He couldn't even hold his wife. If something unexpected happened, wouldn't he want to catch her blind? Good, he nodded, and just as he put liaba in his mouth, he saw his father-in-law staring at him. He blinked and added, I know Dad. Hurry up and eat. Old Mao nodded in satisfaction, threw the smoked fish from the plate into his mouth, wiped his mouth, and said, I'm going to work at the ranch too. If you're bored this afternoon, just stay at home and watch TV, or play games with Anna and Eva. There is a game console in Boyka's room. Your sister-in-law Maeva brought a lot of fruits and drinks yesterday, and she wanted to eat them in the refrigerator. Don't run around. Our place is quite remote, with tigers, brown bears, wild boars, and wolf packs everywhere. After finishing speaking, he stood up and patted Suli's shoulder, then went to busy himself. Chapter 7. The Old Mao with Inner Play. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After Andre left, Suli glared at Labar and Anna with big eyes and said, Are there really tigers here? Anna and Eva nodded together and said, At the beginning of spring this year, there was a calf missing from the pasture, but it made my mother and a few aunts feel heartbroken. Dad and a few uncles said it was the tiger that took it away. This way, Suli nodded and continued to eat. My goodness, where have I been abducted? Why did even the tiger come out? After finishing their meal, the twins calmly went back to their house to take a nap. Suli tidied up the plates and sat on the sofa quietly smoking. In fact, his smoking addiction was not high. He also smoked with those bad classmates at school, with the aim of joining them and saving himself trouble every day. I found that I couldn't stop smoking, so I decided to just do it. After staying in the living room for over an hour, he was so bored that he got up and went to the yard. Several Caucasians didn't care about him wandering around the yard, and they all frowned and stuck out their tongues, while Suli took a cigarette and strolled through the entire courtyard. I have gained a preliminary understanding of my new home. The yard is at least 100 meters long and wide. To the south is a row of connected wooden planks, accompanied by a sauna and a small boiler room. To the north is 2 oversized warehouses, one of which has an open door filled with wood and coal, as well as bags of high-pitched feed and dozens of bags of dog food. The other smaller room is locked and the windows are covered with curtains, but there is still a faint smell coming out from the gaps. It is unknown whether it is gasoline or diesel, and it is estimated that valuable items such as cars or tractors are parked inside. Next to the wooden warehouse was a large vegetable field, surrounded by low fences, estimated to be several acres, with rows of greenhouses inside. He followed the path to the greenhouse area and looked inside and found some cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers. After picking a few fresh cucumbers, I went back to the house to wash them. The sisters just woke up, ate snacks and watched TV. Suli ate a cucumber, and cut the other several into thin slices with a peeler. There was still a lot of fruit in the refrigerator. I took out a lemon and a large bottle of soda, poured white vinegar, sugar and a lost salt into a bowl full of cucumber slices, stirred and poured the soda into it. I cut a few slices of lemon, squeezed out the remaining juice and shook it well. I covered a large bowl with a lid and put it in the refrigerator. After checking the time, I started preparing dinner. There was no rice in the kitchen, so I simply rolled out thin slices of noodles and went to the greenhouse to pick a few tomatoes. In the evening, a tractor pulled into the yard. Suli and sisters went out of the house. Natasha happily kissed her daughter's face with a headscarf. She opened her arms and looked at Suli. The latter hurriedly went forward to hug her. Natasha kissed him on the face. "Hungry? Aunt will cook for you now. I have already done it." Suli looked at Natasha, who was a bit surprised, and grinned. "In the afternoon, I had nothing to do. I went around the vegetable garden and happened to pick some cucumbers and tomatoes. Let's have noodles tonight." The sentence, "let's eat noodles," made Natasha laugh. Andrei, who was preparing to move beef, had a curved mouth. Suli quickly approached him and brought half a fan of beef into one of the rooms. The smell inside was not very pleasant, and the smell of blood was strong. There were freezers on both sides of the room, and an iron frame in the middle near the window, with more than 10 iron hooks hanging from it. After the two of them worked together to hang half of the beef, Andrei patted the leg of the cow and said, "You can eat it open. There are nearly 200 cows in our village's pasture." "Ah! Dad!" Suli shouted more and more fluently, took out a cigarette and lit it for him, saying, "Is the ranch shared in the village?" Andrei nodded and said, "Let's get busy first. I'll talk to you about dinner later." Good. Quickly, the other half of the beef, as well as the internal organs, were moved in. The tripe, intestines, and some lymph nodes were left on the ground to be cleaned up and fed to the dog at night. Andrei divided the beef in front of the rack, while Suli played on the side. "As for the sour ones, don't think about them. If we don't put them in the freezer in this weather, they should have a taste the next day. Dad, why don't we cut some pork tenderloin? Can we have sweet and sour pork tenderloin tomorrow?" "Okay," Andrei nodded and scratched a large piece, estimating it to be 3 or 4 pounds. "Is it enough?" "Enough." He set the tenderloin aside, stacked the other divided pieces of meat in the freezer, and the two of them packed the beef properly. Andrei walked in with a water pipe and washed the chopping board. Then, smoking a cigarette, he drove the tractor to the silo, closed the door, and together with Natasha, cleaned the beef belly and intestines. Cut it into pieces and throw it into the bucket. Spoon a few bowls of cornmeal and mix with water, then pour it into a large pot to stew. Andrei asks Natasha to take a shower and rest, watching the fire slowly wait. "This kid changed his mouth so easily, and I'm getting more and more fond of it. He must be trying to numb our nerves and then find a chance to slip away. Yes, it must be like this." The more he thought about it, the more Andrei couldn't help but snort coldly, "Little guy, let me show you what old Zheng's methods are." The firewood reflects the old Mao Z who adds drama to his inner reasoning, which looks a bit penetrating. Dinner is not particularly sumptuous, with smoked sausages, smoked fish, and pickled cucumbers, followed by chilled Sprite cucumbers, and scrambled tomatoes and eggs. The noodles have already passed the cold water, and this summer's cold noodles are also good. Hey, cucumbers are delicious. Anna was happily eating cucumbers, her little mouth chattering as she said, "Quack quack quack, is that so?" Andrei took a fork and tasted it, but couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and tilt his head. "It's really good, sour and sweet," he said, I learned this from those chefs in my previous hotel, but they are used to brewing red wine. I think it's better to use soda in the summer. Su Li stirred noodles for the sisters while talking. Tomatoes had been boiled into thick soup and mixed with noodles and cucumber shreds. The sisters could not stop eating. Andrei got up and took a bottle of vodka and 2 small cups. Let's drink some. I can't handle alcohol. He looked at the large bottle of wine that was over a liter tall, and his heart was trembling. Andrei poured him a glass and said, You just need to take a sip. Andrei looked up and drank a full glass of wine. He pinched the pickled cucumber and sniffed it under his nose, then took a bite and said, Gwazi our village, pushed forward 30 years, is all forest and wasteland. The old villagers in the village used to be retreating from the same army as me. We responded to the call with our wives and children and came to the Far East to open up land. The house under your feet now is built by me and other brothers, one by logging. Chapter 8. That's not my home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that time, we were all a collective, eating and working together, and gradually settling down here completely. Andrei sighed with some emotion. Later on, our great motherland collapsed, and some brothers returned to their hometowns. There were not many people left, and later on, the younger generation did not want to stay in the village. They longed more for the prosperity of big cities, so they also left one after another. Fortunately, my previous relationship still existed to some extent. After the eldest was discharged from the military, he was assigned to the police station, and the others also had their own lifestyles. The one that worried me the most was the 6th. This bastard and the girl went to Novosibirsk, and I don't know how they were living there. Su Li lit his cigarette and filled it with wine, saying, Now in that village. Those who can come came yesterday. Ah. He widened his eyes and looked at Andrei. Our village doesn't add up to 30 people now. Andrei nodded and then shook his head again. It's estimated that someone will move back to live by the end of the year. I heard from Julian that his young man has lost all his business this year. If he can't pay his debts, he'll have to come back and farm. And Vasily's youngest daughter. Her husband even touched that thing while drinking and gambling, and he owed her a lot of debt outside. Maybe he will sell the house and have nowhere to go. He will probably return to the village to live there for now. Natasha and the others didn't speak, just lowered their heads and ate noodles. Su Li picked up his glass and walked with his father in law, saying, So this ranch belongs to the common property of our village. Andrei let out a mouthful of wine and said, Although it's a shared property, we still have a clear idea of who owns a few cows, pigs, and sheep. Our village now only has 11 households in total, all of whom are elderly people at home and cannot eat much. By the end of the year, a batch of cattle and sheep will be sold, and everyone will share the money equally. They will basically stick it to their children. The living environment is not very good now. Su Li nodded and didn't speak anymore. They were each having dinner. After finishing, Su Li wiped his mouth and said, Dad, you said I will start school in the second half of the year and not report to school. Will anyone check? I have already paid my tuition fees in advance. Andrei squinted his eyes and said, It's okay, Ivan will handle it later. Remember your child, if there's anything you need in the future, you can come to Ivan. As long as you have money and connections, it will save you a lot of trouble. If the other party doesn't comply or scratch, you can go to the third party and he will handle it. Ah. Didn't third brother open a small supermarket? Su Li's surprised expression made Natasha across the street laugh and say, If he says it's a small supermarket, do you believe it? The most promising people in our family are not the police boss or the doctor's fourth, but the third, Vasily, who runs a mall in Bratsk because his uncle is the deputy mayor there. I can't figure out one thing. Third brother has this kind of relationship, why didn't he find a brother.in.law in Bratsk and choose me instead? Natasha didn't speak, just looked at him and smiled. Andrei took a bite of smoked sausage and said, because my father used to stay in China for a few years, and when he returned to China, he had me. He has told me a lot about you Chinese people since childhood. Your simplicity and kindness have always been the most frequently mentioned words by my father. More than 2 months ago, Ivan met old Anton at the police station and helped him solve some problems. He mentioned you from his mouth. Natasha and I are very clear about old Anton's character. After all, we have lived together for decades. He has very poisonous eyes and is very accurate in judging people. After spending more than a year together, he didn't have a bad impression of you. Later, the boss contacted Lao Wu and asked someone to retrieve your medical examination form from last year. We were very satisfied with everything, so you naturally appeared at my house. Old Anton, thank you damn well, you're such a nice person. Seeing Su Li fall silent, Andre patted his shoulder and drew a big cake for him. My home is also your home now. You don't have to worry about food and drink now, just accompany our daughter. After a few years, when you grow up and mature, let the third person use their relationship to get you a good job. Your days will get better and better. I want to give my family a call. Su Li looked at Andre with a pleading expression on his face. After a moment of silence, Old Mao finally nodded and asked Natasha to bring his green screen phone. Unexpectedly, his mother in-law was very thoughtful, and when she turned it on, it turned out to be fully charged. He flipped through the contact list, flipped down the black selection box, and then pressed the dial button. After the phone was connected, both sides fell silent for a long time, and the other end of the phone asked, "Are you short of money?" "No," Su Li replied with a sullen voice, looked up at the sisters with tomato juice on their opposite corners of their mouths, smiled and was about to speak, but a voice that disgusted him rang from the phone. "De Gue, today is the child's birthday, can't you put your things aside? You can't call me if you're okay, let's talk, it's nothing, I just wanted to ask if you've eaten or hung up." After hanging up the phone, tears streamed down his face. Andre and Natasha, who were originally worried, didn't understand what he was saying, but their sad tears couldn't be fake. The old couple didn't know how to comfort him when they saw him like this. Anna saw her good friend cry, and she also felt her nose sour. She came to Su Li's side and shook his shoulder, saying, "Can you stop crying? I'll bring you something delicious, and once you have something delicious, you won't cry anymore." Eva comforted Su Li with her own understanding and got up to bring potato chips and candies to the room. Natasha felt that the child should be quiet now, so she took the 2 daughters to the yard to cool off. Andre lit a cigarette and silently smoked. "Can you talk? Today is my younger brother's birthday." Su Li drank half of the glass of wine in one gulp and wiped away his tears. "He helped my younger brother celebrate his birthday, and it's been many years since he helped me celebrate it. The first birthday since my mother passed away was when he and that woman helped me celebrate it," he said. "Later on, it rarely happened because that woman was pregnant with a child. Today is my younger brother's 10th birthday, and I can tell he is very happy. He has loving parents, but I didn't. I miss my mother." Andre felt a sense of unease in his heart. He had seen this kind of family entanglement before, and many children were slowly learning to indulge in such an environment, eventually leading to a bad side. Because the person who cared about him was no longer there, without the constraints of family members, teenagers were like wild horses that had run free, riding the dust on the road to improvement or deterioration. He served Su Liman a drink and said, "Do you want to go back and take a look? At least it's your family, and it happens to be summer vacation time now." "I won't go back." Su Li looked at the somewhat stunned old man and smiled sadly and relieved, "That place is no longer my home. If I go back, I will also be kicked out by them. Otherwise, you think I have been living alone in Irkutsk for more than 2 years. Why don't I go back home during the new year?" Andre didn't answer the conversation, but drank one cup after another with Su Li. Now he needs to vent his frustrations and find someone to confide in, and he is very suitable for himself. Chapter 9. Lunch Talk. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Good morning, Dad. Suli rubbed his temples and sat on the sofa, while Andrei, who was eating, smiled and said, "It's already noon. Natasha has stewed chicken soup for you. Let's have some first." As he spoke, he got up and went to the kitchen to fill him with a bowl of chicken soup, which contained a whole chicken hind leg. Suli took a sip from the soup bowl and said, "Where are Anna and Eva?" "They followed Natasha to the ranch to ride horses. In the afternoon, you rested at home. Last night, you were very drunk. You drank half of a bottle of wine alone. Don't drink so hard next time, it will hurt your body." After finishing the dumplings on the plate, Andrei wiped his mouth and took the cigarette handed by Suli, lighting it up. "I'll go ahead and get Anna and the others back to accompany you later," he said, patting Suli's back. He put on his shoes and drove the tractor out. He went to the ranch with a thud. Suli drank chicken soup and let his eyes go. "Did he say anything after getting drunk last night? Do you feel like the way my father-in-law looks at me is a bit strange?" Shaking his head, he didn't want these things. He got up and went to the kitchen to make some dumplings. He took a bite and raised his eyebrows. "Cream and mashed potatoes dumplings. My mother-in-law's craftsmanship is not bad." He shrugged his shoulders and ate 2 dumplings, took a sip of soup, and finally nibbled on the chicken legs. He washed the dishes and wiped the table before wandering around in the yard. Dehei lay under the shade of the tree, sticking out his tongue, and glanced at him before ignoring him. Entering the room where the meat was stored, he dug out some of the extra organs from yesterday and thawed them in a bucket. Then he clapped his hands and came to the shade of an apple tree. One thing that puzzled him was that there were many apple trees planted in the yard. Not to mention a whole family, the whole village ate them together and couldn't finish them all year round. The apples on the tree are not big now, and it is estimated that they will be eaten by the end of August or early September. He stayed under the tree for a while before putting the thawed organs in a bucket. Remember Anna's suggestion to give them to Hua first, cut the cow kidney into small pieces with a small knife, and feed them to Hua bit by bit. After Hua finished eating, he knew to lick his hand with his tongue. Suli smiled and touched Hua's head, then got up and went to Dehei's place. He cut a large piece of meat, which melted into ice on the outside and was hard inside. He smashed it into Dehei's rice bowl with a thud, and the angry Caucasian looked at him with a bad expression. "Wu, what are you looking at? Suli also has a support now." He turned his head and shouted to the nearby flower, "Wang wang wang." Hua let out a few shouts in unison, and Dehei immediately turned his head away, not looking at the annoying human in front of him. Suli snorted proudly, "You little sample, I can't even take you back." Suli picked up the bucket and threw a piece of internal organs for Xiao He, De Huang, and Xiao Huang. He went back to the pool to clean the bucket. As he lowered his head to wash his face, Anna and Eva happily returned to the yard. He wiped the water stain and turned his head to look at it. Oh my goodness, the nosebleed almost came out. The sisters were wearing long skirts of different colors, and they nearly blinded his dog's eyes when walking around the headlights. The trace was clearly visible. Suli went up to hold Eva and said, "Anna, you are so beautiful today." "I'm Eva." The little girl puffed her face in anger and rubbed it against his face, saying, "Bad guy, you can't tell me from Anna." "Yeah, ha ha ha." Suli made a ha ha and dragged the sisters back to the room. Although the room was a little stuffy, the fan was still cool when it was turned on. He locked the door and rubbed his hands, with a cheap smile. "Let's play some new tricks today." Although twins may not have high intelligence, they understand everything they should know. It is precisely in the age group with high hormone levels, coupled with what their sister-in-law says, that they do not resist talking to Suli. When Andrei and Natasha returned in the evening, the table was also filled with dishes. He knew some of China's home-style stir-fry, and there were Chinese chefs in the hotel kitchen. When he had free time, he learned some from them. Suli filled his father-in-law with wine. Seeing the sisters shaking their heads, he grinned, "Is it delicious?" Hara Shao, the little tongues of the sisters all popped up. Natasha gave Suli a thumbs up. The father-in-law raised his eyebrows and said, "Not bad." He. After getting the answer he wanted, he chuckled twice and started eating big. "Dad, how old are Anna and Eva?" "I feel like they are at least 7 or 8 years older than me." Natasha couldn't help but laugh and said, "Silly child, the people here are more precocious, and Anna and Eva don't have to work. They only eat, sleep, and play all day. It's normal for them to look fuller." Andrei took a sip of vodka and said, "It's strange to say they're the same age as you. Since their fever subsided, their appetite has increased significantly. Your mother and I didn't mind either." After the summer vacation ended, the third child took them to school in Bratsk. At this point, he couldn't help but sigh and say, "In the first 2 years, it was okay. We were all children, and our reading abilities were similar." However, as time went on, it became even more strange. Other children were able to fill in good papers, but our 2 little ones were so frustrated that they just taught empty papers. The angry teacher called your third brother to school. Ask the 2 of them and they will cry. In the end, the teacher suggested taking them to the hospital for examination. The doctor said it should be the high fever that burned their brains, and their intelligence level can only be maintained at around 7 years old. Although it may improve slightly in the future, it is also limited. Coincidentally, the 4th-year-old was interning at a large hospital in Moscow. Looking for connections, we asked experts to take another look and the answer was the same. After discussing with our family, we decided to take our 2 daughters back to the countryside to live. There is no hustle and bustle of the city, nor are there any ill-intentioned villains. It's also good for them to live carefree here. Suli lit a cigarette for his father-in-law, and the old man puffed out a cigarette ring. He looked at his daughter, who was eating big, and his eyes were full of love. "Originally, your mother and I wanted to take care of both of them for a lifetime. Being an old girl is not bad, anyway, there are many old girls here in Mao. Later, Lao Lu ran away with a girl from another family, and I was thinking. Your mother and I will eventually grow old. At that time, your brothers will have their own families, and it's okay to take care of one while also taking care of 2. Even if they are willing, what about their wives and children? The people here are all very realistic. Although family relationships are important, it also depends on the actual situation. Last year, I went to Irkutsk to meet an old comrade in arms. His family had 3 sons and 1 daughter, who was not very beautiful but had a loving Chinese husband. I stayed at my old comrade's house for 4 days, but he had difficulty with his legs and feet. Every day, his son-in-law was busy with work, and he had to work during the day and cook when he came back at night. But that young man didn't have any impatience, so I couldn't help but ask him, "Aren't you tired of living like this?" At this point, Andrei smiled with some emotion and said, he said this is all he should do. His wife didn't mind him being poor and married him, giving birth to a son and a daughter. This is his home, and it doesn't matter if he gets tired of it. Chapter 10. Peaceful Countryside. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text.